Welcome to Tell the Whole Damn World in another special Cal History episode. We're the podcast that celebrates all things Cal and the prominent people associated with UC Berkeley, known to many as the center of the universe. We hope to put a smile on your face and help you come away feeling good about your connection to the greatest university on the planet. If you have a friend who went to Cal who hasn't yet heard about us, please tell them all about it. It's Monday, July 14th, 2025. I'm your host, Reza, and it's another great day to be a bear. Thanks so much for joining us. How many of you out there are familiar with the term Rube Goldberg machine? Have you ever wondered who Rube Goldberg was? And did you realize he was a golden bear? Well, you're going to want to pull up a chair for this one because we're going to have a lot of fun learning all about him today. Before we bring Leslie on, I want to take a moment to congratulate Dr. Madison Permal for being awarded the 2025 Berkeley Citation. That's one of the highest honors the university can bestow, recognizing individuals for their exceptional contributions to the university that go above and beyond. As one of my most dear mentors, Nad has been an extraordinary role model for generations of Cal students. And as I like to say, he's the personification of Fiat Lux and will always be one of my favorite golden bears. And I want to express how much we appreciate all of you out there listening and watching. Would you be kind enough to help us grow this podcast? All you need to do is tell your closest Cal friends about it. You can tell them to go to tellthewholedamnworld.com or just share us on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Tell the Whole Damn World. And you can follow us on X and Blue Sky at Win4Cal. That's Win, the number 4, Cal. Speaking on behalf of all of us here, including Ahmad and Leslie, thank you so much for listening and watching. We appreciate you more than you know. Hang tight, and I'll be right back with Leslie Mitchell, and we'll spend some time learning all about Rube Goldberg. We're going to lead into our discussion by playing a little 2-minute video featuring Rube Goldberg himself.
Well, folks, there she is, the Rube Goldberg door opener upper. Sure, I know they have a gadget called an electric eye that does practically the same thing. But that's no good for a waiter. You see, the electricity might give the waiter a shock, then he'd forget to come back to pick up his tip, and he'd lose his professional standing. How does this door opener upper really work? It's very simple. But watch close. Now here's what happens. You see, waiter places cat B on pile of dirty dishes A. Now cat B sees mouse C. Of course, this is a stuffed mouse because he must be used for the next waiter. Now cat jumps on mouse C, causing lever D to lift lighted candle E, which ignites fuse F and sets off bomb G, opening door H very gently. Well, folks, I suppose there are one or two among you who think that my inventions are a bit ahead of their time. A shade fantastic, perhaps. All right, go on and say it. Downright screwy. But let me tell you something. I've got lots of company, genuine inventors, guys who've got their stuff protected by the United States Patent Office. And believe me, some of it needs protection, if you know what I mean. For instance, now here's an invention that was granted patent number 556248 back in the year 1896, but don't ask me why. This little nifty is a labor-saving device if there ever was one. It's an automatic hat tipper for the lazy Lothario. Fitted snugly inside of this deluxe derby, that is, in addition to the wearer's slightly addled head, is a conglomeration of wheels, cogs, gears, ratchets, counterweights, strings, and pulleys, which gallantly doffs the chapeau whenever a young heiress passes by.
This week in Cal history.
By now, I'm sure all of you are familiar with Leslie Mitchell. As a third-generation Cal alum, history major, and lifelong Golden Bear fan, she's our resident Cal history expert. She writes wonderfully informative articles about notable people connected with our university who have done great things in this world. You can visit her website, calbearshistory.com, or follow her on Twitter at calbearshistory to learn more about the people who have been a part of the rich history of the University of California. You hear me say this all the time, but we couldn't be more lucky to have Leslie as part of the show. Today, Leslie and I are going to talk about Reuben Garrett Lucius Goldberg, better known as Rube Goldberg. He was best known as being perhaps the first famous cartoonist in the world, and was known for his cartoons depicting complicated gadgets performing simple tasks in indirect, convoluted ways. And of course, he was a Cal alum. Welcome again to the show, Leslie.
Thank you, Reza. I appreciate your kind words as always. I just want to be sure that I don't diss my other major. I was actually a double major in history and Dutch. So let's hear it for the Dutch Studies Department.
There you go. Go Dutch.
Go Dutch. That's what I always say. Let's go Dutch. Anyway. But yeah, Rube Goldberg, I was so tickled when I first discovered he was a Cal guy because it's not something that you hear about very, very much. Class of 1904. You think of him, I don't know what it is, as an East Coast guy, which is where he did spend most of his career, but he was born in San Francisco on the 4th of July, 1883. His dad was a Jewish immigrant from Prussia, and his mom's family were Jewish immigrants that came over in the gold rush, and she was from Gilroy, so they're real Californians.
Yeah. And there were seven children in the family, but 3 died in childhood. And
yeah, that's pretty standard for the time, unfortunately. Yeah. And his mom died when he was, she had, they describe it as sickly, which is, 7 kids in, 10 years or whatever. Anybody would be sickly.
Right.
Yeah, it was not uncommon to die young at that time. So he was raised by his dad, Max, who was in with the whole San Francisco political machine. It was very much, most of the American cities were run by these sort of political machines at that time where, you did favors for people in the neighborhoods, and it was all somewhere between slightly corrupt to very corrupt. And he was very much involved in that and made quite a nice living doing that to support his kids.
And he showed an aptitude for drawing at a really early age, right? I think from the notes that you'd prepared for this interview, I read that he started drawing at the age of 4 and tracing things and all of that, basically.
Yeah, that's the family story, that he got a book called The History of the United States, which doesn't sound like inspiring to draw particularly, but apparently was full of illustrations. And it was written by a guy called Bill Nye, which I don't think it was the science guy. I think it was somebody else.
Unless
and he
he's
got
immortal.
Excited by it, and he got the tissue paper from his mom's dress patterns and started tracing the drawings out of there. And then he started tracing everything. Apparently it drove the family crazy because he was just constantly tracing everything. And then from that, he moved to actually drawing. So from a very early age. And he said he said nobody in his family was artistic. He got no inspiration or support particularly from the family. He said it was just something that was in my bones, that he had to do it.
Right. And he was so kind of on a mission to further his education as an artist that he, at the age of 11, I guess he had a bike route delivering newspapers, and he paid for his own art classes, I think.
From a guy named Charles Beale, who was a sign painter in San Francisco. So obviously Mr. Beale must have had art interests as well. But he taught he had a class, and kids could come and learn drawing techniques for 50 cents a lesson. And he did that for about 3 years and won prizes in city school district competitions as a result. And then he went off to Lowell High School, where he apparently was quite the artist for the school newspaper. He had stuff published pretty much in every issue of the school newspaper the whole time he was there. Well, and then it came time to go to college.
Well, I was just going to back it before we get that far, to kind of add on to what you were saying about how he really didn't get any encouragement from his father. His father, I guess, was kind of really concerned and worried about him with these artistic ideas. And it kind of even goes beyond that because he was born left-handed, which of course at that time was considered, oh, you don't want to be left-handed, and tried to, make it so that he did everything with his right hand. And I think it was kind of cute that his father would make fun of him every time he dropped a plate or something. And Rube worked with his right hand until, in his own words, eventually I could drop plates with my right hand as well. I mean, he seems like just a naturally really funny guy. Like a lot of
Yeah,
these little
yeah, he
quotes and
does. He
everything.
does. And yeah, you can kind of see it. Your kid wants to be a cartoonist. Really? Seriously, kid, you need to get a real job. We've probably all had that conversation with our parents at some point. But yeah, in fact, his dad even tried to get him. He pulled strings because he had these political connections, and he got him appointments, congressional appointments to both Annapolis and West Point because he figured there are going to be no art majors at the military academies. And Rube was like, no, I don't want to go to West Point or Annapolis. And they finally compromised on the University of California across the bay in Berkeley.
Makes a lot of sense.
But the deal was he had to major in something practical, none of this art stuff. So he majored in mining engineering, which, offhand, it doesn't really seem like mining engineering and cartooning go together. But, there's a lot of drawing involved in engineering, a lot of really technical stuff, plus the whole, when you get into all those Rube Goldberg device things, a lot of that is kind of engineering-ish.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, absolutely. And so they settled on Cal, which was a great choice,
Of
obviously, just
course.
across the bay. But he lived at home in San Francisco. So, from what I understand, he would make the commute every day that went like 3.5 hours, taking the cable car to the ferry building, take the ferry across the bay, and then take the train to downtown Berkeley,
Oh, the
right?
the old key system, which is now the F bus, but back then was a train.
Man,
So right up to the campus.
wow.
It's like the classic Bay Area commute, the cable car to the ferry to the key system. Doesn't get better
Right.
than that.
In the time before bridges, that's for sure. So he started classes at Cal in 1900,
Right.
and he finished Cal in only 3.5 years. It was
Right. He
pretty
graduated from Lowell High School in 3.5 years, and then he graduated from Cal in 3.5 years. So
wow.
he obviously didn't have too much trouble with the schoolwork.
I found it really fascinating that he used some of the professors from his time at Cal as kind of inspiration for some of the characters in his cartoons. He always said that his college experience helped give his work breadth and depth, which distinguished him from other cartoonists of his time who had much less education. And he ended up using a lot of his professors as inspiration for his cartoons. And he regarded his professors in general as oddballs who were incapable of performing practical work or transforming their bookish genius into common sense.
I never had any professors like that. I'm sure you didn't either.
I thought that was so cute to
Yeah.
think he's sitting there in the class, and one of his professors in particular with mining had as their big project to determine the weight of the earth.
Yes.
Right.
That was their big project for the year. And you can it just reeks of Rube Goldberg devices because he said, and I'll read the quote. He said, this professor's name was Frederick Slate. He said his laboratory was filled with pipes and tubes and chemical containers and springs and odd pieces of equipment. So, it doesn't that exactly sound like a Rube Goldberg device? And the whole point was to weigh the earth, which is insane. It's just, you could see this professor, and in fact, there's a professor character that shows up in lots and lots of his cartoons called Lucifer Butts, and he's sort of based on Professor Slate from Cal.
Right, with an enormous red beard and shiny gold-rimmed glasses,
and super enthusiastic apparently about everything, which is cool. I like that. That's the kind of professor you gotta love. This kind of a little bit oddball, but super enthusiastic and wanting everybody to be excited about his little subject.
Right.
Yeah, and then with all the tubes and pipes and whatever, it's perfect. So I think Cal should get a lot of the credit, really, for
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I did thought it was so cute to think that, he's sitting there in these classes and he's kind of doing all this tedious work to try to like figure out the dead weight load for non-existent buildings and mines, and just kind of felt absurd about all of it. And all of that kind of translated into the cartoons that he did later in life. So
I
that
think,
that just
he
really struck.
later said something like putting in endless amounts of incredibly difficult effort to achieve basically nothing struck a chord, a universal chord in people that he said he didn't really realize when he started doing the cartoons, but it really hit the sweet spot with people.
Right, right. I can imagine. Oh, that's so cool. And so while he was at Cal, he did drawings for the Blue and Gold yearbook as well. And was he one of the founders of the Pelican? Is that correct?
That
Was he?
I'm not sure. I know
Okay,
he did a lot of work for the Pelican, but I don't
okay.
know when exactly it was founded.
Because it
The
started right
Pelican
around
was
that
by
same
the way,
time.
for those who don't know, was a humor magazine that was published by the students. It was still in publication when I was at Cal in the late 70s, early 80s. And in fact, the building, the Pelican building that we've all seen with the big pelican out front, was
Right.
where they were based.
Right across from Barrows Hall. Right.
Formerly known as Barrows Hall, yes.
Yeah, that's right. I don't even know. What is it called now? I don't even know
I
myself. Do
don't know.
you?
I call it formerly
Former
Barrows.
like Prince.
I'm not sure what exactly. The hall formerly known as Barrows. I'm not sure what they've settled on, or if they have settled on a name yet. Anyway, so yeah, he also had a job, and I wonder have to wonder how much this played into his future career. He had a part-time job. He had a friend whose dad was the sheriff of Marin County, and he got him this job that the dad did, the two of them, where they would escort mental patients from Marin County to the state hospitals in Napa and in Stockton, which is a hell of a part-time job. And he said that he would spend a lot of time talking to the patients while he was transporting them. And he came to the conclusion after doing this for a while that basically the line between insanity and not insanity is basically a matter of opinion. And there's no real, everybody's crazy. And it's just a matter of how much crazy and who's drawing the line and that sort of thing. And again, I think that plays in a little bit to the weirdness of his work as an artist.
Right, right. I mean, I think for sure. I mean, I think that's an interesting take and perspective on it all, and you can really tell. I mean, there's a cute little video that I found. I guess it's really part of the Wikipedia page about him, where he's doing a little drawing and talking. You can kind of get that sense that he is just right on the edge of kind of being a little crazy about things, but he just in a very comical way. So he had a
And
real good.
an enthusiastic kind of
Yes,
crazy.
that's
I mean,
for sure.
that's another thing. It's like with the professor that wants you to weigh the earth. It's like, where's the line between being super enthusiastic about something and going over the line to being just a kook?
Right, right, totally,
And by the way,
absolutely.
one point I want to mention about that weighing the earth project is Rube Goldberg said every single person in the class got an A because nobody knows how much the earth weighs. That's my kind of project, actually.
Sounds like a good class to take.
So when he graduated in 1904, his dad was still trying to make sure he did something practical, and he got him a job he was in with all the political types in San Francisco, and he knew the chief engineer of the city of San Francisco, so he got him a job in the office of the chief engineer. But the job was mapping the sewer system, which actually required him to go into the sewers a fair amount of time. Which I just love. Dad, I got you this great job. You got your engineering degree, and now you can go into the sewers.
Well, I mean, at least at the time, it paid pretty well. I mean, $100 a month or something
Yeah, I
along
mean
those
that
lines. I
was
mean,
decent. I mean, a
right,
decent income, especially for somebody right out of school. But
exactly.
for a guy
Yeah.
who wants to be an artist and you're in the sewers, it didn't work out. He really didn't enjoy it. And in fact, there's a great quote that he gave about he was sitting next to another guy who'd been there 40 years. And he said the dust had settled on his shoulders and he seemed like all the life had been sucked out of him. he just sat there in a torpor that was worse than death as far as the 22-year-old kid was concerned. He did not want to be that guy.
Right. Well, yeah, and I can see that. Like just, so many of us, I mean, we go through life and there are things that you kind of have to do, but spending an entire career doing something maybe that you really just don't enjoy doing. And he realized at an early age that this just was not a good career
And
fit
he
for him.
also had something he was inspired about. I mean, that's another, not everybody, particularly at that age, has something that they're just passionate about and really want to do. But he did, and it's really hard to settle when you've got a
Right.
passion like that. Sort of
Right.
like doing, a Cal podcast every week.
Never felt more alive in my life.
So he quit the job after 6 months, the sewer job. And he said everybody he knew thought he'd, quote, gone goofy. And he got a job at the San Francisco Chronicle for $8 a week, which after making $100 a month was a pretty big pay cut.
Right. Right. Like a 2/3 pay cut. Right. So not nearly as much. And then he went to the San Francisco.
Bulletin. There used to be like, I don't know, 5 or 6 major newspapers in San Francisco. Because you can imagine before internet or TV or radio or anything, that was the primary way people got information. So they were very popular. So yes, he moved over there for $10 a week. And at
Ooh,
both places, he was primarily doing sports. Because back then, newspapers could not print photographs. They didn't have the technology yet. So you had to, they got drawings of sporting events and would publish those. And then Goldberg started doing them with like humorous angles, with funny captions. And it caught on and he became a huge hit and was, in fact, considered to be like the number one humorist in San Francisco after a couple of years.
wow. Yeah, that's great. And then the great earthquake happened in 1906, and he was in San Francisco at that time when it happened, and his family home was spared, but the bulletin's offices, along with much of his work, that was all destroyed in the fires. And so in 1907, he decided to move all the way across country to New York without securing any job offers. He just kind of took a leap of faith that he wanted to make his way out to New York and forge his path doing
Yep.
cartoons, I guess.
And, you got to give Dad credit because by this time, I guess Dad had decided that he would be able to make a living with this cartoon stuff. And he gave him some cash for the trip. And he also, I love this story, he gave him a diamond ring and said, if all else fails, diamonds have value. You can always sell this. And if you're desperate, and you can either come back to San Francisco or do whatever you need to do with the money from this diamond ring, which he apparently kept the rest of his life. He was glad he never had to sell it.
That's awesome. That's good.
So
Pop.
off he goes to New York. He actually just talked his way into a job. It was one of those kind of, fast talk, go into an office. Hey, is there anybody here I can talk to kind of deals? And he got himself a job at the Evening Mail in New York, which was another one of these many newspapers. Every city had lots and lots of papers. And he was making $50 a week now. So he was hitting the big time.
There you go. Better than the sewers.
He started doing, and they started letting him doing, I think he still did some sports stuff, but they started letting him just do freestanding individual comics. So he came up with this one called Foolish Questions, and it caught on. It became very popular, where somebody's asking somebody a question and the other one comes back with a snarky answer. There's one where, I think it was the first one, it says the guy is asking his son, "Son, are you smoking that pipe?" And the son says, "No, Dad, this is a portable kitchenette and I'm frying a smelt for dinner." Now, I don't find that extraordinarily hilarious. But
Back at the time.
Yes,
However, right?
Tastes change.
Right.
And I guess just the idea of a son being snarky to his dad, I don't know what, but it caught on. And this whole Foolish Questions thing became a huge hit in New York. I think they said he did like 450 of them in the space of a year and a half that got published. So it was obviously a big deal. And then he was at some vaudeville show in New York, and somebody was on stage, knew him, and said, got him to come up on stage and ad lib some snarky responses to obvious questions. And that was a big hit. And then he ended up turning it into a vaudeville act. And he toured the whole East Coast from Boston to Atlanta doing this vaudeville show with these foolish questions where he would just stand up there and go banter back and forth with silly questions and snarky answers. And it was, again, a huge hit, which is a little bit weird, but
Yeah, different times.
it was the
And
time.
during that vaudeville trip, if I read things correctly in your notes, he toured with a trained monkey and even an unknown Italian dancer by the name of Rudolph Valentino.
That's right. He shared his dressing room with this kid named Rudolph Valentino that nobody had ever heard of.
But I think the thing that really just shocked me, like beyond belief, was that, we're talking about how much he got paid for different things. But I mean, this thing must have really caught fire with the cartoons that he did. Because by 1915, and so figure like 12 years or 11 or 12 years out of Cal, he was making $25,000 a year in that era, right?
Which, yeah, I should have done the calculations. I can't. That's hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe $1 million equivalent
in this era, right?
I should have done the calculations, but yeah, it's a ton of money,
right?
And then they tried to hire him away. William Randolph Hearst tried to hire him away from the Evening Mail, and he offered him $50,000.
Yeah,
which is like, wait a minute, what?
Right.
And again, this is the era. Nobody had ever been a famous cartoonist before. It wasn't a thing. But the Evening Mail circulation went up like by 2.5 times. And he was, I mean, I'm sure there were other things in the paper than cartoons, but he was given the credit, at least, for hugely expanding the readership. So Hearst wanted some of those readers. But the Evening Mail got into a bidding war, but they couldn't really afford $50,000 a year for a cartoon guy. But what they came up with, and this was a brand new thing, they came up with the idea of developing a syndicate where they could sell his work to newspapers all over the country. And you have to, again, remember, this is something that had never happened before because communication and travel and stuff is still relatively slow, certainly compared to today. So every city had its own cartoonists and there was no sharing. So they came up with this syndication idea and they sold his work to newspapers, to San Francisco, to New Orleans, to Minneapolis, the whole country. And that's where they got the money to match the offer, the $50,000 offer, and he stayed. And what I love is he had to have the cartoons done like 3 weeks in advance so they could all be published on the same day. And then they were just sent in the mail. You just put a first class stamp on it,
Yeah.
Put it in the mail, hope it
Right.
gets there.
Right. The internet of the day.
Well, yeah, and apparently it worked. I don't know, I guess they had telephones. So I guess if it didn't show up, you could call and say, where's
Right,
our
where's-
cartoons?
But yeah, living in New York at that time, making that kind of money, he was like, part of New York's intellectual and entertainment elite during the 1920s. And I understand from your notes that he had parties at home with guests like George Gershwin and Alexander Woollcott, Harry Houdini, Irving Berlin, the Marx Brothers.
Yeah, if you get to hang out with the Marx Brothers, how much cooler can you be?
And then there was this one great story, and I'll let you say this one because I thought it was really funny. But
he was buddies with F. Scott Fitzgerald and another writer called Ring Lardner, was mostly a playwright at the time. And they went out drinking together, the three of them, and poor old Rube passed out. And F. Scott Fitzgerald and Ring Lardner shaved his head. So they must have been pretty good friends or pretty good enemies or something. As I said to you before we went on, Fitzgerald and Lardner were both famous as alcoholics, and then sadly, both of them ultimately died from their alcoholism. But it's probably a good idea, don't go out drinking with famous alcoholics because they can probably drink you under the table anytime.
Important life lesson.
Yes.
From Tell the Whole Damn World.
Remember that.
But yeah, to get back to his work, drawing these cartoons, it was just awesome to think that, he lived in an age where he didn't even have electricity, right, for lights.
Well, when he was born, right.
When he was first born. And so he lived in this era where all these technological changes were coming. And his cartoons themselves basically kind of talked about the social pain and enjoyment of learning to live with automation and other technologies, the telephone, the camera, the radio, the automobile. I mean, all these different things that he never had when he first grew up, and just kind of the emotional wear and tear that all of that had on people and the impact of technology.
As well as the excitement and the fun of it. I mean, he
Right.
wasn't just all negative, but
Yeah.
it was
Oh, yeah.
sort of the combination of this just giant. I mean, obviously, we're living in an age of massive technological change ourselves, but I don't think it's quite as dramatic as not having electric lights when he was born to having nuclear weapons and moon landings by the time he died. I mean, that's just,
Right.
it's people in that time were really having a transition of everything that they did every day of their lifestyle. We're having that kind of now too, so maybe we can relate.
All right. No, I think it's so cool that he was able to do this in a way that, because he brought this enthusiasm to it and did it in a very comical, funny way, kind of poking fun at all of it. And it was something that was just immediately relatable to people because it was just a single panel cartoon. It wasn't a strip that would basically take you through time or follow character development. It was just a one-shot deal, basically, that he was able to encapsulate in his drawings.
Yeah, and he started to come up with what we now call the Rube Goldberg device or machine. 1914 was his first comic doing that, and I think it was called the automatic weight loss machine that involved a guy. As I recall, there was a donut sliding down a pole, and the friction of the donut melted some wax that's holding the pole up, and that was holding this guy who wanted to lose weight up, and then that caused him to go through this hoop, and the hoop then was held up by a balloon, and the balloon was pushed onto a pin, and the pin popped the balloon, so the guy fell onto a hot stove, and then he jumped off the hot stove onto a table, and then he got stuck in a hole in the table, and he had to stay there and he couldn't eat until he lost enough weight to get out of the hole, which is a little distasteful today as a concept of, body shaming and a little icky. At the time, it was very popular, and that kicked off the whole Rube Goldberg device with balloons getting popped by pins and donuts melting wax
Right.
and all this kind of crazy
And
stuff.
one single domino that you tip over and it launches, and all these different things that happen as a result of that one action, and all these different things happen super complicated to maybe perform some simple task, right? It's
There's one
pretty inventive.
that actually was later on a U.S. postage stamp, and that's called the automatic mouth wiper. And it's like this whole incredibly involved machine that ends up with a napkin wiping your mouth after going through 15 steps. And there's another one that's interesting because that one is just kind of fun and frivolous. But there's another one that was like an automatic garage door opener. And his whole system involved a dog and I don't know what else, all sorts of things happening, crazy things that would automatic lift the door. But of course now, automatic garage. I got an automatic garage door opener. Most people seem to. So
Right.
Some of them actually became real things. They were
Right.
just crazy, bizarre ways of getting there.
Well, yeah, and I think the term Rube Goldberg basically came into common use in the 1930s, and there was some mention, I guess, of it in the congressional record in the 1940s with
that's
members of Congress.
People started saying, "Oh, these government programs, they're boondoggles. They're so complicated. Nobody can figure out how this is supposed to work." And that's when they started referring to them as Rube Goldberg programs. And so it went beyond. In the 30s, it started being used as a complicated machine. And then it morphed into, as it's used now, anything that's really overly complex, people will tend to call it Rube Goldberg, use that as a term for it.
Yep. And then later on in 1966, it first appeared as an adjective in the Random House Dictionary, I guess. So,
right. That's my favorite trivia question. Who's the only Cal alum, at least as far as I know, whose name is actually in the dictionary as a word?
Right.
So it's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool.
I pick up on it. I guess I listen for it because I know he went to Cal, when I see somebody saying, "Oh, that's a Rube Goldberg device," or Rube Goldberg program or whatever. I'm like, yes, that's our guy.
That's right. Well, and you need look no further than the internet, and you see people put together these, ridiculously intricate and crazy Rube Goldberg devices, right? Like you just, again, flip over a domino or something and it sets into motion all these different things that happen, launches a basketball on top of a roof and you're counting on that to come and hit into a certain place. And,
I think there's actually an annual contest called the Rube Goldberg Prize or something for coming up with these crazy, complicated machines. Yeah, you can find them on YouTube, the entries and the winners and stuff. So it continues to fascinate people. Well, back to the 30s, unfortunately, in the 30s, the Great Depression hit. People were a little bit, first of all, newspaper sales went way down because that people couldn't afford anything. And people got a little bit depression, the frivolousness of some of his cartoons. The taste changed and people went more with that's when I started the comic strips a lot with ongoing stories, sort of melodramas and I don't know if anybody who grew up reading like Mark Trail and these kinds of comic strips that tell stories that go over like soap operas almost that last for weeks or months. And so he actually tried that in the mid 30s. He had a comic called Doc Wright that involved this kind-hearted rural country doctor and his life and stuff. But it was popular commercially, but it just wasn't his thing. And he quit. Again, he quit after about 8 months because he just thought this is stultifying. I can't do this. And then he basically didn't do a lot of cartooning for a while, and instead he wrote short stories a lot, which is something he'd been doing all along. And he'd get them published. I mean, big time magazines, Vanity Fair, Life, Saturday Evening Post. They would publish his short stories, so that kept him going. And then in the late 30s, he got a call from the New York Sun newspaper. They said, "How would you like to do political cartoons?" Which is pretty far off the trail from doing crazy machines. But he said, okay, so he gave it a try, and he became a fairly noted political cartoonist throughout World War II, particularly and into the 50s.
Well, I think the one image in particular, I guess he won the Pulitzer Prize for this cartoon that he did called World Peace, right? And it had an atomic bomb on the edge of a canyon or ravine, and you had on one side you had world control versus world destruction, something along those lines.
Yeah, and then there's this little suburban house with a little family out in the yard having a nice sunny afternoon that's perched on top of this bomb, and they're completely oblivious to the fact that they're balanced on, a bomb that could destroy everything. So, that got the 1947 Pulitzer Prize for editorial cartoons.
Right, and I mean, that certainly still rings true today, right? I mean,
it certainly does, yes.
Yeah.
And what I love, too, is when he got the Pulitzer Prize, Walt Disney, of all people, wanted to congratulate him. And he did an actual cartoon in the Rube Goldberg style. It starts off with Pluto the dog, I think, breaks a window chasing a ball. And this sets off this chain reaction involving Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse and Goofy. And it ends up with Donald Duck, who's screaming, causes a windmill to turn. And then the windmill writes out, "Congratulations, Rube Goldberg," from Walt Disney, which I thought, which I think shows the degree to which he had permeated the zeitgeist, as it were, of the time, that somebody like Walt Disney would actually copy his style as a tribute to him.
Well, for sure. And so in 1946, he was one of the founders of the National Cartoonist Society and was chosen as their first president. And the society began giving out an annual award to the Outstanding Cartoonist of the Year, which it called the Reuben Award. And I guess That's probably still going strong today. After all these years.
In fact, a Cal alum named Stephen Postis won it a few years ago. He's the guy that writes Pearls Before Swine, which is a very popular comic strip. I don't know if you've read it, but it has rat and pig and the alligators and all of that. It's pretty funny. I enjoy it. So, yeah, it keeps it in the family.
Yeah, later on in life, he became a sculptor and he
decided, that's something I've never done. I want to give it a try. So, he turned to sculpting.
I mean, what a creative guy, I mean, I think that was the cool thing. And just to, I'm going to include this little video clip of him and, just so you can actually see him and hear him. And, you instantly are kind of drawn to him because he has this magnetism and this enthusiasm that just comes through right away. And you instantly like the guy. And I think it's just so awesome to think that, rather than spending a career mapping sewers, he really followed his passion and made something of it. I mean, as a cartoon, again, it's incredible to me to think, like his father had every reason to be like, I don't know, son, like if this is what you want to do with your life, like good luck to you. But boy, I mean, making that kind of salary in that era, I mean, he just was tremendous.
Becoming world famous, yeah.
Right. And I just thought that was awesome. And so apparently there was this interview that he gave at the age of 87 at the Smithsonian Institute.
Right. They did a tribute to him, retrospective of his work and such that he attended.
Right. And I have this quote from him that I thought really was just wonderful that you found, Leslie, that just brought it all together for him. And he said, "At the time of my graduation, I thought my course in engineering was a complete loss. But later I came to the conclusion that nothing is wasted, especially if you have a sense of humor. I believe the idea of going through such outlandish complications of inventive efforts to accomplish practically nothing struck a universal chord which I was not aware of when I first hit on the idea." It really just encapsulates it just perfectly, puts
And
it
I
all
love that
together.
he brings it back to Cal.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And by the way, he donated his papers to the Bancroft Library at Cal, so he always remained very fond of Cal and affectionate toward his time there.
Yeah, no, that's so awesome. He passed away, I guess, only 2 weeks after giving that interview in December 1970. But as you noted at the beginning of this interview, I mean, he's always thought of as this East Coast guy, this New York guy. But really, I mean, it just shocked me to think that he's a Cal guy, a West Coast guy, San Francisco, Cal. I mean, how cool is that, right?
It doesn't get much better.
Thank you so much, Leslie, for shining a light on Rube Goldberg, and really appreciate you making the time here today. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Reza, and go Bears.
Go Bears. I still can't get over how Rube Goldberg was able to command so much money and salary back in that era. It just goes to show you, if you follow your passion in life, you never know where it's going to lead. As you could probably tell from that video clip at the beginning, he was a person who exuded charisma and enthusiasm. And I love the fact that he leaned on his education at Berkeley as the inspiration for much of his work drawing cartoons. This podcast is entirely a labor of love and a reflection of how much we love our university. Please help us grow this podcast by telling the whole damn world about us. As I noted at the top of the show, just tell all your Cal friends to go to tellthewholedamnworld.com. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Tell the Whole Damn World, and you can follow us on X and Blue Sky at Win4Cal. That's Win the number 4 Cal. Share us with all your Cal friends. Thank you so much for tuning in. We sincerely appreciate all of you out there listening and watching. See you next Monday. This podcast is about celebrating all things Cal and the prominent people who are passionate about the University of California. Do you feel Cal is the center of the universe? Do you bleed blue and gold? We want you to tell the whole damn world about it. Go Bears!